Hi all crochet lovers. In the previous two tutorials I covered the crown and the head portion of this crochet hat. In this tutorial I'm going to cover the brim portion. In the previous tutorial I made 3 rows of a different color yarn. So for the brim portion, change and go to the main color yarn. For the first row we are going to skip one stitch and we will make 14 double crochets in the coming 13 stitches. Because we already made a chain of 3 in the first stitch. Actually here I made a total of 13 stitches because while ending this row in circle I'm going to make one extra double crochet to make it 14. So all over this pattern in this row we are going to make 14 double crochets. So those are 14 double crochets. Now we reach that area where we have the spider. So here we are going to make a chain of 3. And then we are going to skip 3 stitches. In the 4th stitch we are going to do a double crochet and continue making our 14 double crochets. So these are our 14 double crochets. Again we'll do a chain of 3 just over the spider, skip 3 stitches and start making 14 double crochets. As I was mentioning earlier, I did only 13 double crochets in the beginning, so I'm adding just one more double crochet here to have 14 double crochets, and I'm joining this row by a slip stitch. For the second row we are going to skip the first stitch by doing a slip stitch and we'll go into the second stitch. Make a chain of 3 and make total of 12 double crochets. So since we did a chain of 3 first, we are going to do 11 more double crochets and we are going to skip the last stitch. Do a chain of 3. In this chain space, make a double crochet. Again a chain of 3. Skip the first stitch, make 12 double crochets and skip the last stitch. So in row 1 we had 14 stitches, in row 2 we'll have 12 double crochets, that is. So those are 12 double crochets, chain of 3, double crochet in the chain space and chain of 3 again, and continue the pattern by making 12 double crochets by skipping the first and the last stitch. Join the row by a slip stitch. For row 3 we are going to skip the first and the last stitches and we are going to make 10 double crochets. We are doing a chain of 3 for the height and then we'll do 9 more double crochets. So those are a total of 10 stitches. A chain of 3. We'll go into this chain space and make a double crochet. Chain of 3. Go into the next chain space and make a double crochet. A chain of 3. Skip the first stitch and do 10 double crochets by skipping the last stitch. So those are the 10 double crochets. a chain of 3, go into this chain space and do a double crochet, chain of 3, go into the next chain space and do a double crochet, chain of 3, skip the first and the last stitch and do 10 double crochets. For row 4, skip the first stitch, make a chain of 3 and do 7 more double crochets. So we'll have a total of 8 stitches and we'll skip the last stitch. So those are 8 double crochets. Make a chain of 3, go into the first chain space and make a double crochet, chain of 3, go into the second chain space and do a double crochet, chain of 3, go into this chain space and make a double crochet, chain of 3. Now skip the first stitch and make 8 double crochets, and continue the pattern. Join it with a slip stitch. For row 5, skip the first stitch and do 6 double crochets, skip the last stitch, chain of 3, double crochet in this chain space, chain of 3, double crochet in this chain space, chain of 3, double crochet in this chain space, chain of 3, double crochet in the last chain space, chain of 3, skip the first and the last stitch and do 6 double crochets. Join it using a slip stitch. Now skip 2 stitches. In the third stitch, make a chain of 3. Go into the same stitch and do 4 more double crochets. So we'll have 5 stitches in this. A chain of 3, go into the chain space and do a double crochet, chain of 3, double crochet in the chain space, chain of 3, double crochet in the chain space, chain of 3, double crochet in the chain space, chain of 3, double crochet in the last chain space, chain of 3, skip first 2 stitches. In the third stitch, do 5 double crochets, chain of 3, double crochet in the chain space, and continue the pattern. Join to the shell by using a slip stitch. Skip the second stitch, go to the center stitch by slip stitches, make a chain of 3 and do 2 more double crochets in the same stitch. So this time we are going to make a shell of 3 double crochets, chain of 3, double crochets in the chain space, chain of 3, double crochet in this chain space, chain of 3, double crochet in this chain space, chain of 3, double crochet in the chain space, chain of 3, double crochet in the chain space, chain of 3, double crochet in the chain space, chain of 3. In the center stitch, do 3 double crochets, chain of 3 and continue the pattern. Join using a slip stitch, skip to the middle stitch, make a chain of 3, go to the chain space, add another chain there because now we are going to do just double crochets. Make 2 double crochets, a chain of 2, go to the next chain space, 2 double crochets and a chain of 2. So wherever we have chain spaces, we will do 2 double crochets and a chain of 2. But wherever we had a shell of 3, we will do just 1 double crochet. Two double crochets in that chain space and a chain of 2. Two double crochets, chain of 2, 2 double crochets, chain of 2, 2 double crochets, chain of 2. Now above this shell of 3, we'll do 1 double crochet in the middle and chain of 2, and then continue the pattern by doing 2 double crochets in the chain spaces and chain of 2s. Join it using a slip stitch. Now introduce the other color so that you make another border. We are just going to do double crochets over each stitch. And we are not going to do any increases or decreases. We are just doing double crochets all over the stitches. So wherever you had chain of 2, do 2 double crochets, and over the 2 double crochets do 2 more double crochets. And wherever you had a single double crochet, do 1 double crochet. So we are mainly doing just 1 double crochet for each stitch. We're going to do 2 more such rows. Based on your yarn and based on the size that you're making the hat, you can decide on the number of rows you need for the other color yarn. So here I completed the other 2 rows. So I have 3 rows of this color yarn. Then I added picots of chain 5, which were separated by 5 stitches. So the picot is made of 5 chains, that is chain 5. This is the completed hat. I added a bow to it. The bow is made of shell stitches, a shell of 5. And this is how it looks. I hope you liked it.